All right, so my product's been registered in California. Fantastic. What happens next? What's my next options? What happens if I need to revise the label somehow? This section here is going to be able to tell you what we need to do. What's an amendment versus notification? We're also going to talk briefly about the annual product renewal and the mill assessment, because that is something as a company you're going to have to keep in the back of your mind every year. So revisions to products, the California amendment and notification processes differ from the US EPA. So while they also have a notification process and a label amendment process, it's different. Most cases, you're going to need to send your change of some type to the US EPA first before it comes into California. Now that is, sometimes companies get confused upon that. They say, oh, well, hey, Rich, I understand, but it's a minor change. You know, I tell you what, accept the label now, and we'll let the EPA know next week. Yeah, I mean, y'all look honest, but to protect the human health and the environment, back into our mission statement, we need to have that documentation from the US EPA before we can accept it. In most cases, there's 3 different methods to revise the product, providing that specific criteria are met. And this is the 3 different types are amendment, notification, and non-notification. And we're going to discuss this right now. All right, so a label amendment is literally exactly that. It's an amending my product of some type. You know, but what kind of amendment are you talking about? Well, it could be anything from adding a new use site, adding a new pest, changing a rate. Possibly I want to change the human hazard signal word or some other one of the label requirements. What we need in California is an application. We have an amendment form, which we'll talk about in a second. $25 application fee. A copy of the US EPA stamped accepted label and any other documentation. Again, this is to show us that it's been at the EPA first. 6 printer proof and final printed labels of that new product, and any applicable data if necessary. Now, one of the things that John hammered home and Joe Lynn hammered home is that cover letter. If you include your cover letter, tell us what you're changing. And don't, sometimes we'll get some stuff that, hey, we're only making this change. Let us know of all the changes that you're making on the label, because that'll help us out and again speed up the process. Again, getting you guys to that strike it gold that much faster.
Rich, to add to that label and stuff like that, which really helps out too, is if you highlight the label for us too. Now, given that, we won't only look at the highlighted portion of that label, we still review the whole thing. Even though we receive a highlighted label, we do find time and time again that there's some other changes besides that. So if you are going to highlight, which we highly recommend, make sure you hit every change on that label.
And kind of to piggyback on what John just said, when you're highlighting that label, you don't have to highlight all 6 copies. Just 1 copy would be great. In fact, please don't highlight all 6 copies. Just 1 copy would be fantastic. All right, so you're going to notice that this, this is found in your workbook. All the application information, pretty much the same as we saw before in our registration package. But the only difference is basically box 10 down below. Adding a crop, adding a new use site, adding a new pest, alternative formulation revising, precautionary language, signal word, any other non-FIFA related changes to the warranty statement, as we were talking about earlier, or other. And what might that other be? What do you guys think? Somebody tell me what an other might be. Average, perfect. Susan said adding a coverage area. You're kind of changing the use rate, so that would fall under the other. All right, so let's talk about notification. What's next? Well, if you follow the California Notice 2002-1, it identifies what we can and cannot do in California, or except through notification. I need to add that on. Now, it does differ from the US EPA. I mentioned that. We're going to talk about that again in a few seconds. So let's say an example up here is we're adding a pest that does not pose threat to human health. With the US EPA, that's notification. With us, it's a label amendment, and we need efficacy data to prove that you're adding that pest and it's efficacious against that specific pest. So again, there's subtle differences between the two. I believe in our workbook, correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, that we do include the amendment notification and non-notification comparison table. I believe it's near the back.
Yeah, it's actually in the guide, Appendix I. So that's.
Oh, yeah, it's right up there in the reference. I guess I'm getting tired too. All right. So we need the form of the notification of minor changes. It's a $25 application fee. The copy of the US EPA standard accepted label corresponding documentation. And only 3 labels of the printer proof or final printed labels. How about somebody at this table? What do we think? Why do we only need 3 and not 6 for notification? Well, it's not going to go. Okay, so Pam Brew said it's not going, I'm talking to this. It doesn't need to go to chemistry. Well, that's true. It doesn't, because it's a notification, it won't have to go through a scientific data review. So we don't need the extra labels to be able to go through, to send out to the various locations. All right, so here's the form that we're going to have for it. Again, a lot of the same information that you're going to see, except for, again, box 10's a bit different. Deleting pests or deleting use sites. Changes in stated nominal concentration, non-FIFRA related element, changing non-FIFRA related labeling elements, adding symbols or graphics, redesign of the label format, that type of information. Those things, you notice on here, there's one that's missing, other, because our notification process is very specific. It has to come off that very specific list that we can accept through notification. We have a question over here. I'm coming.
So Prop 65.
Thank you very much. Good night. Mic drop. All right, so Joe, you want to take Prop 65?
Yeah, I'll take Prop 65.
Oh, no, it's perfectly fine, because we knew this question was coming.
Yeah, Prop 65. So WEHA, that's the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment, has a new type of warning and a graphic to be put on products. So that includes pesticide products. So right now, there is, I believe it's out for comment right now. They're proposing to change it from attention or notice instead of having that warning, because there is that conflict of signal word. So we're waiting to see what happens with that. For US EPA, we're still in discussions of how they are going to be, if those need to be submitted to them as an amendment, or notification or non-notification. So we are just really waiting to see what US EPA says on that. That's
Thank
all
you, Joe.
I'm saying on
Hold on a second really fast, Pam. Okay. For those viewing via the webcast, if you don't know what Prop 65 is, it is a proposition here in California that basically says there's products that are most likely to cause cancer in this ingredients in this product that may cause cancer. It is a Prop 65 that passed many moons ago, and it's something that we're still dealing with. Oh, gosh darn it, I keep hitting that button, sorry.
We just sent in a submission to the EPA for Prop 65 only. It went in and EPA rejected it, sent it back to us with a letter stating they're not accepting them and that we are to go in directly into California only with it and that they want nothing to do with it.
Do you have that in writing?
I do. I had the letter.
Yeah.
Could you forward it on?
Yeah.
Would that be fantastic?
I forwarded it to Chelsea.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
But that was our first one. So we're kind of like at a standstill because we don't know what to do with it.
Okay, great. Thank you for letting us know that.
Actually, thanks a lot, Pam, for that. Because actually, you're the first person that I've heard of that they've rejected it. So I'm not quite sure what they're going to do. It's a tricky situation here in California, that's for sure. It's definitely tricky at the federal level, so we'll see what happens. All right, so back to our notification. Again, there was no other up there because, again, the list has to be very specific. Amendments versus notification. So I could kind of hear people thinking in their heads, because I'm, telepathy and all that, is, well, Rich, amendment and notification, I require $25. I require an application. I require anything else, EPA documentation. What's the difference? Why do something different? Well, for a label amendment, the applicant must wait to receive their stamped accepted label before it can be sold or distributed into California. So basically, we are going to need to review the label, stamp it, and then get it back to you. Notification, if you're confident enough in your abilities that you followed the proper California notification, as soon as you submit it into us, you can start selling and distributing into California. You probably don't remember earlier on, but that big wheel chart that Ann had shown earlier, I believe, had notification deficiency that we had to actually process as label amendments. So that does happen. So only if I would recommend that if
Question?
Oh, you have a question?
Oh, sorry, not to interrupt. I was just, when you do a public records request, though, you're getting the most recent California stamped accepted label or the most recent label on file in California?
That would be the most recent file. So if it's a notification,
Okay.
That's going to be the one. Anyway, we're going to move it on. I don't remember where I was. I'm sorry. Yes.
Tag teaming on her question, will we receive a copy of the notification label back with some sort of DPR stamp?
Yes. Yes, you will. You will receive a stamped accepted label with a notification stamp on it, which is different from the label amendment stamp. So we want to make sure that you guys had, something.
Rich, got a question back here. Hold on.
All right.
Is there a list somewhere in the booklet of non-notification?
You can actually find that in that 2002-1 statement. Or notice.
It's in the California notice.
Yeah, I believe it's in
in your
booklet.
workbook. But you'll be seeing that during our breakout session.
Yeah.
You'll be wanting to.
It's just an FYI. Many years ago, we came into California with a notification. We went ahead, changed our label, printed it, got it out there, and it came back and California rejected it. We no longer print. We wait on that stamp label from California because we had to pull product and redo it and everything. So we learned our lesson.
Well, no, and she brings a good point. You're taking a gamble at that point, and I think all the RSs would probably agree that the amount of effort and work it takes for us to process a notification is the same amount as a label amendment. And I always recommend to my companies, hey, just submit a label amendment. It's going to be the same process, same amount of time and effort. So, and I think with the notification, if it doesn't comply with notifications, then we have to do this additional paperwork to notify you folks and then process it as a label amendment, and then we can't really process it because maybe it's lacking some EPA documentation and/or data, and then we have to end up returning it again. So it does become a little convoluted a little bit on our end on how to handle those notifications when they don't really comply with notification.